there's quite a scramble amongst those nations, those NATO member states who don't currently pay 2%, the minimum figure towards the NATO budget, for them to do so and to be shown to be doing so by the time of the NATO summit in Washington in July. So as just the candidate, he's having an effect. I'm not saying that it's wrong of what NATO is doing. I think it's right to be thinking about it, but I think it needs to be weighed out carefully the extent to which it is or is not playing into Vladimir Putin's agenda.
Yes.
Of course, we must support Ukraine. The future security of Western Europe depends on Ukraine succeeding in defeating Russia. But I think it needs to be nuanced and be carefully done.
I suppose it's not just wise, but plainly necessary, isn't it, for NATO to be prepared to take charge of arms supplies to Ukraine now?
Well, on one level, it makes complete sense. But of course, on another level, it's quite a worrying development insofar as you could actually say this is playing into Vladimir Putin's agenda. He has been saying all along that this effectively is the West, effectively NATO, attacking Russia. Now, we know it's not that way around. Russia attacked Ukraine, but he's selling it the other way to his own people. So as sensible as this would seem to be on one level, I think the alternative construct of continuing with the contact group of some 56, 57 nations already supporting Ukraine might be the more politic thing to do at the present moment.
Yes.
I'm not saying that NATO nations shouldn't be doing more and that we shouldn't be finding a way to protect Ukraine away from Donald Trump if he gets to the White House, and indeed the Republican Party already vetoing the 60-odd billion package that's there in Washington at the present moment. But I think we have to be a little bit careful about NATO rushing too much into this, because I think it does play into Vladimir Putin's agenda.
So I hear that argument, Richard, but how do you then take account of the fact that there's an American election coming, that Donald Trump may well win that election, and he's very open about wanting to pull back from supporting Ukraine, which could be a change, an inflection point in the war?
No, I think you're absolutely right. But his words have already had quite an effect. There's quite a scramble amongst those nations, those NATO member states who don't currently pay 2%, the minimum figure towards the NATO budget, for them to do so and to be shown to be doing so by the time of the NATO summit in Washington in July. So as just the candidate, he's having an effect. I'm not saying that it's wrong of what NATO is doing. I think it's right to be thinking about it, but I think it needs to be weighed out carefully the extent to which it is or is not playing into Vladimir Putin's agenda. Of course, we must support Ukraine. The future security of Western Europe depends on Ukraine succeeding in defeating Russia. But I think it needs to be nuanced and be carefully done.
I guess with or without a change in Washington, D.C., it is clearly a very, very strong argument that says that across NATO, members need to up the level of defense spending very significantly.
Yes, of course, that's absolutely right. And that's a related issue, but not quite the same issue. There's a very strong case to say, if you're not up to the 2% minimum, you should get up to it. And then remember that actually 2% is a minimum. It's a floor. It's not a ceiling. And that other nations, including our own, should be considering getting back to the sort of levels of spending that we were during the days of the Cold War. Because what that level of spending in the Cold War brought us was a conventional as well as a nuclear deterrence from the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union attacking Western Europe. And that means getting back to 3 or 4%, not fiddling around at the 2.1, 2.2, or indeed in our case, 2.22. We should be getting up to 3 or 4%. That's a very strong case that is making itself on a daily basis.
All right. Richard Dannatt, thank you for coming on as always. I want to now get the thoughts of Andrei Osadchuk, who's a member of the Ukrainian parliament. Welcome to you, Andrei.
Good evening.
It must be a great worry to you and to Ukraine that NATO and Europe even have to consider how to respond to the possibility of America withdrawing support from Ukraine in your war with Russia.
Yeah, definitely, it's a big problem, and as Stoltenberg just said very diplomatically, that each day of delay cause a lot of difficulties for Ukraine. But in reality, each case of delay of the decision in Congress is paid by blood and life of Ukrainian soldiers on the front line, and new destructions of civilian infrastructure due to Russian missiles attack. We see that European Union, some of the countries in European Union, they are trying to compensate the lack of US support, but it is understood that without American support, it will be very difficult for Ukraine to continue our fight. And if this delay will continue for 1 or 2 more months, the consequences can be absolutely terrible.
But you believe then that in the event of America withdrawing its present level of support, and its support now has been diminished and slowed and delayed, it would turn the tide in Russia's favor. That is your plain fear.
Yeah. Look, unfortunately, the 2 years of war in Ukraine clearly show that a lot of politicians who speaks good speeches about Ukrainian support, in reality, they like to win local elections. We saw that almost all over the Europe, and even in the United States, they are in reality in the local fight for presidential chair. And that's the target as for Republicans, as for Democrats. And unfortunately, Ukraine is just one of the pieces in this political puzzle. But at the moment, I feel more or less optimistic because based on everything what I know from Washington, I very much hope that during April, the saga of discussion in Congress shall be completed.
And just lastly, you're having to raise the age of military conscription from 25 to 27. How serious is the need for more fighters and soldiers on the front line?
Yeah, it's not a secret. It's absolutely serious because a lot of people, they are on the front line for 2 years or more. And it is extremely, extremely long period of time. Plus, we are not hiding that we also have a lot of losses which shall be somehow compensated. So, and currently, the Parliament of Ukraine and the General Staff of Ukraine is heavily working with the improvement of mobilization. And definitely, we will continue to bring more people to army because that's the only way how we continue our fight.
Andrei Osachak, Ukrainian Member of Parliament, thank you for coming on. Andrei, let's talk again soon.